My name is Greg. I'm filling in for Eric this week, I guess. I don't know. I'm just pushing buttons. I don't know what the fuck's going on. Today we've got Dutch Gunner on as our special guest. He's running for CSM this year. We got Caleb on, Bard Ghost, and Don's here. So you guys can take it away. I'm just going to press more buttons and see what happens.
And we already have decoration and stuff. We got kittens. Where's the naked ladies that we had on the other night?
Oh dear God, no! Oh God.
Well, hey, I'm running without Eric. There's no filter, so everything is allowed. Go crazy, Greg.
No,
that's about as crazy as I get. We got the Beebs on there. It's my countryman.
Yeah, I am introducing new bees. There is Metal Bee and Headbanger Bee and Mind One Bee.
So I guess it's fair, Dutch. Do you want to do an introduction for explain who you are and such?
Yeah, go ahead and tell the audience who you are. Maybe how long you've been playing the game, things like that.
Okay, well, that's a good thing I came prepared. Hello, everybody. My name is Dutch Gunner. Well, it's not really my name, but it's my character name. In EVE, you can definitely consider me one of the ancient parts of EVE still playing. I started playing in 2003.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah, yep. If I knew about the beta, I probably would have been involved by then, but I've been playing since 2003, been involved with all different parts of EVE throughout my history. The only thing I didn't do was scamming, because that's the part where I just draw the line with, nope, it's okay that it's available, but I don't feel comfortable scamming people, so I never got into that. And I've been all over New Eden. I've been in nullsec, highsec, lowsec, wormhole space. Up until recently, I was also very active with public fleets in Poshven. And oh, thank you for the compliment. I do try my best on not having too much of a Dutch accent. But yeah, I've been playing for a long time. I like this game. Currently trying to open up content as much as possible. And I'm running for CSM again. I ran last year and I did amazingly well for a first-time candidate without block support. I ended up at position 17 out of 40 candidates.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and at the end, I even had some of the big names. I got in further than those, and I had a private message from Mike Estraya stating, "You better run again next year." So if you get that kind of feedback, you're very motivated to try again. Especially considering that after everything was over, there was an analysis with how all the votes were done, and there was a ballot analysis. And there was one ballot that had me at position 2, and the person who was on number 1 made it to 14 out of 40. But if I had been on number 1 instead of position 17, that would have pushed me to at least position 12. So that just was an amazing realization, like, hey, I'm not just throwing my name in the hat, I'm actually have a good shot at making it into the CSM.
That's excellent.
That's close.
Why do you want to be CSM? What's what motivates you to do this job?
Last year, it was more like, you know what, I'm fairly knowledgeable about certain parts. I got intel, or at least information, that I could provide proper feedback on towards CCP if they look for input from that angle. And just overall personality traits, like I've got multiple degrees. I've got a bachelor degree in business administration. I've got a bachelor degrees in logistics on supply chain management. I got a degree in payroll services, so I understand economics, and how things are connected. And just looking at other things.
Oh, good, because CCP doesn't.
Lol, shots fired, Dawn. I was
more let's be nice here.
I was thinking you were going to try and actually poach him and get him on your logistics teams when we can start crabbing again.
I don't do markets. You know
Sundering
that.
is recruiting.
It's not.
Right.
It's not my
No,
my
but
thing.
it's just doing so many different things and understanding things and certain ways in which I approach challenges, like with the, and this is just a recent one, um, the drifters. The drifters are one of the hardest things to overcome, and I started looking into what information was available, cracking down on things, and it's like, oh wow, you can actually dodge those doomsdays if you pop the overshield without losing a ship, and you don't have to spend billions on ships, implants, or fittings to be able to pull it off. This is amazing. If more people know, they can give it their own twist or use their own approach if they have this information. So here's a manual, here's the information, and just goes to show you don't have to go over the top with skill points or ISK to do this.
So you've been around for a while, Dutch Gunner. I'm thinking, have you always followed the CSM activities, and do you have any favorite former CSM members?
It's definitely something I picked up since, let's see, I think the last 3 years is when I started to really pay attention, and I would say in the last 5 years that it really got on my radar to pay attention to what was happening. The initial, I'm definitely guilty of the part where it's just so many null blocks being able to organize themselves, get the votes in. So it's strongly related to what the null blocks want to have done, but then looking at the feedback, like, hey, what does it actually mean to be on the CSM? What does it do? Following the communications that came out on the CSM forums, that's like, oh, this is completely different. Okay, awesome. And to answer the other question on favorites, there's definitely people I would love working with if I would make it to the CSM. But for this year, it's definitely one of the strongest years for the opportunity to have a well balanced representation of different qualities. Like null blocks will have their representation one way or the other. There's multiple wormhole candidates, you got multiple low sec candidates, there's multiple high sec candidates, Poshfin candidates. So if things work out ideally, you could have everything covered, or at least have somebody with expertise on one field or the other, and the entire CSM combined would cover a lot.
So I'm gonna push a little bit back on that because I can tell that you're slightly I don't know if you are sour or disgruntled about the fact that there's null dominance, but it sounds a little bit like that to me. But mm, what is your reasoning if you feel like null is overrepresented, and which candidates in the past do you think have done too much biased work when it comes to null block representation compared to say other representation?
It's I'm not sour, I'm not disgruntled. It's like I said, it's just if you're well organized, if you can get the votes you need, you're sure to have your candidate that you want forward. Like, you give them a good shot. That's just how it works, and I'm not disgruntled about it, I'm not unhappy about it. And there are certain parts where if you don't look into it, there's a lot of people saying this, so it's probably going to be true. But if
Okay,
you look
let, let,
into
let,
it, you see it works differently. So that's the part
Yeah.
where I'm going to push back a little bit to your pushback towards me.
Okay, let me let me rephrase it. Which groups do you think are underrepresented because of null block dominance? Like who is it out there that is not getting a proper and decent voice or representation on the CSM? And how would you personally try to improve that?
Okay, then I would say the people living in Empire space, and that would be both high sec and low sec. And that's part of the game. I mean, if there's 10 slots and you got 40 candidates and you need to get as many votes as possible, there's going to be a lot of people that don't make the cut. And high sec is extremely divided. And not everybody is going to go out there and say, you know what, my voice might make a difference, or here's a person I think who could indeed make it. I'm not going to bother. why could I represent Empire Space with high sec and low sec is, as I mentioned before, I've been involved with all parts in New Eden. I've been done a bit of piracy. I've done mostly anti-piracy because I found that a lot more fun in low sec. I organized and ran corps. Currently, I'm very active in high sec. So there's a lot of mechanics that I've been involved with, and I can see how things are connected and work together. And I'm not just a one-trick pony. Just because I'm currently running on the platform on lore and lore-related content and accessibility doesn't mean that's the only thing I can provide my input with.
Oh, interesting. Small follow-up on that then. Just because since you've actually put your face out there and dropped in on us to talk about your campaign, I think you should have some slightly challenging questions. You do realize
Oh
that,
dear God, Caleb,
you
be
do realize-
Oh
nice.
no.
No, you do realize that we had Steve Renukin for a maximum amount of actual years that you're allowed with the new rules to actually be on the CSM. He's like the grandfather CSM member, and his platform was, well, mostly high sec and third-party tool stuff. What do you think you can do that he didn't do over the past 3+ years?
That's a really hard question to answer.
Right for the jugular.
Primarily because there's the part where it's like, okay, it's really hard to see what a specific individual added or didn't manage to add for a specific platform.
True. Okay, I've been a little bit tough on you, and I must admit that.
But that's fine.
I think you were running last year, and didn't you run the year before too?
Nope, last year was my first year. This
Okay.
is my second run for making it into the CSM.
Well, I kind of liked your approach last year, and but as you know, there is a limited number of seats, so I must admit that I didn't end up putting you on the ballot. I wanted a Joker, and I think I was split between you and White Orchid, and White Orchid is running again this year. So I want you to maybe try and convince me, why should I put you instead of White Orchid or anyone else on my ballot this year?
Okay. You're really having a go at it. It's a challenge, but I'll gladly take them on. Why could you put me forward? It's mostly on how I approach things. There's people saying like, this is my view, this is how it needs to be. Any other views, any other approaches are just plain wrong. And I don't work that way. It's like, okay, where do you come from? Like if somebody would reach out like, hey, this is an issue, can you bring it forward, or this needs to be addressed? I'm like, okay, tell me more about the issue. What is the issue? And if somebody would come up with, and this is just me grabbing an example with EdenCom was a setup, it's a failure, they need a reward or something for their efforts. And it's more like following up, because it's not just the emotion, and it's more like, okay, what's the real issue you're running into? Is it that you didn't get a reward? Is it because you're unhappy with the outcome? And other mechanical things like the standings that locks contact access to Poshfin and things within Poshfin. Like, what's the issue? Do you have any personal thoughts on how it could be improved? Or is it more that you would like to do something, but you can't find that in the game? And if you look into that and you start working, and if somebody comes up with, hey, I'd like to do this, but the ship isn't working, or how do I work that? It's not me dictating, this is how it's going to be. It's like, okay, what are your views? How do you want to move forward? And if there's things that even if I don't necessarily agree on it on a personal view, it's like, hey, I might not agree behind that stance or the thing. If it is a good idea, if there are good suggestions, I will take it up, I will roll with it, and I'm really good at combining different ideas, different things that are mentioned, and then say, okay, these elements are good, put them together like this, it's even better than all the individual parts.
Great. And now I've been playing Bad Cop for a while, and I saw that the Good Cop just appeared. Hey, Arendis, how are you doing today?
Hi, what's up?
we're doing some sort of CSM stuff. Dutch Gunner is talking about his campaign and platform.
Hey, Dutch.
Hi, Randus. And just in general, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about it, because individual candidates like myself, like I don't stream, because if I was a streamer, I wouldn't have time to put in the amount of effort you need to put in on the CSM if you make it into it. But not having a stream, not being part of a blog, having the opportunity to go to well-viewed and well-known shows to talk about your candidacy, it makes all the difference in the world for your odds, and at least people seeing who you are.
Okay, then I have an important question.
I was gonna say it seems
What the
to
hell
be
are
a
you doing here?
prerequisite. We're the only
Damn
ones
it,
doing it
horrendous.
this year. TRS isn't doing it. His choices, we're the best he's got. No. It seems to be a prerequisite to be a streamer and a CSM representative, because the joke is the most dangerous place in New Eden is between Billy and a podcast. We've got Ron.
How did he get my place? That used to be my place. I've been blamed for doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah, but you don't run a giant
Sheer
black hole
dogged
alliance.
persistence.
Yeah, I guess he won my title. I'm gonna have to step back then.
So we got Billy on Trash Talk Tuesday consistently. We got Kenneth Feld now on TIS. We got obviously Brisk on the Meta Show. We've got Merc and Nom Nom and Brisk all on his show each night, destroying their livers and doing something.
Yeah, that's that grandpa drinking show that they do.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like you should, if you want to be on CSM, you should get a Twitch stream.
And preferably also consider getting drunk on it.
The thing is, I think Dutch does make a point though. Like,
So
we've seen it
quiet, Bard.
before with. Wait, okay. Someone told me I was too loud.
No, I had you down. So hold on, let me put you back up. Yes, now you
it's
sound
fine.
normal. Continue.
That's probably because Greg hasn't moved me on his end, but that's fine.
Yeah, I just cranked you up, buddy.
Okay.
Mhm.
It might be too loud now.
We'll find out.
Chat will. Sorry, what were we saying? Oh yeah, so streamers and time to commit to CSM. Like, I think we've seen it before, haven't we? Though that when they do get on, either their streaming time goes down, or I'm not. I don't mean when I say Jin here. I don't mean he was one, but when he was on, he was publishing a spreadsheet, right, that had who attended what meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see it from people that were doing a lot of other stuff, that they failed to attend so many. So it's like, yeah, there is a point to, okay, maybe, yes, being a streamer gets you an increased visibility to get on, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're the best person for the role.
Yeah, but Ron's running, and I don't know where that's going to land. Because obviously we don't agree with Ron. A lot of us don't agree with Ron.
What? You don't have Ron on your ballot? Dawn, why not?
Because I'll vote however the state tells me to vote.
So,
You're saying he's not going to be on the state ballot?
How would Dawn know? She doesn't make the state ballot.
So we're set to have some CSM candidates on INN's Theta Thursday, which is Thursday at midnight eve.
God, Greg.
So just keep an eye open for that. I'm working in the background very diligently trying to get an epic show with more than one CSM on at the same time.
Yeah, the thing, and I'm just going to grab back to a couple of things that were mentioned before. I mean, if you're reaching, like, if you want to get your message out and you've done your research and you know your limitations, because if I would make it on the CSM and if I would be able to commit fully and make the best I can do to contribute to the CSM, I wouldn't have time or energy to also be streaming. So that's more like knowing and doing your research and knowing where your limits are. So that's why I'm not streaming, but at the same time, that means that if I want to get my visibility, I need to put in the extra work. I need to reach out and find ways on a broad as possible viewing group then I can. And last year, I was fortunate enough to get a shot in talking in stations. They don't do it this year, so then you have to look for other things. And I've had it last year where I got contacted by people like, "Hey, I want to interview CSM candidates. Are you interested?" I was, "Yes, sign me up. When and where?" And then I didn't hear anything anymore. And then it was like, "Yeah, no, sorry, we had bigger names and limited slots, so we just dropped you out." And then it's like, damn it, okay, so I need to do more and I need to do different things to try and get out there.
You got to get out there. What's the old saying? You got to kiss babies and shake hands, or is it the other way around? I can't remember.
Yeah,
What?
something like
Shaking
something like
babies
that.
and
But
kissing hands.
I don't know.
it's it gets challenging when there's a lot of shows that run at midnight Eve time and like a Thursday. It's like, that's a Thursday, midnight Eve time, that's great, but that's 2 a.m. in the morning for me, and I still got a job on Friday.
Details.
So there's limits to what you can do if you want to get your message out there. But that's okay. That's just how it is.
Dawn was up drinking at like 4 a.m. last night, and
Listen, I had a great time.
Lightweight.
Yeah, but Dawn's always up drinking until 4 a.m.
That's not true at all.
mean-
Anyways,
with that comment with weird time zones and that, right?
That's not
We-
true,
we-
and now I'm gonna change the station.
we had this conversation ourselves, right, of organizing CSM interviews, and we were there like, well, probably best to switch it between Theta and Push to Talk, simply because it lets people have it in their local time.
yep. So we're gonna split it up between us eventually. We wanted to wait until the candidates were like finalized, like these are the people approved to run. But this happened today, and it's fine, so it'll work out.
It depends. Like, there's a reason. Like, I reached out first. I went to Brisk. Like, hey, is there an option? Because he's also the anchor for the Meta Show, and then he forwarded me to another person. I started reaching out there, and it's just getting the ball rolling. And I also mentioned like, hey, today would work for me. If it doesn't work because of your schedule or anything you want to talk about, another moment works as well. But there's like, once all the candidates are known, there's really limited time in which you can still plan those interviews. So being early and getting out there, it makes all the difference in the world.
Oh, for sure. So you're like totally on the opposite end of the spectrum of what Goonswarm does. Like, what do you think of the war? How do you view what's going on, and how does it affect you?
For me personally, it doesn't affect me with what I'm doing. And there's the part where I have a personal opinion, and it's probably going to reflect upon me running for the CSM. But my personal opinion was that the entire premise and the reason for having this war is a bit like it's so easy to blame it on the one entity that for years people have been going goons, and it's just so easy to pin it all on one party when a lot of the other blogs are doing the exact same thing that triggered, or at least found the reasoning for now the Pappy group to say, okay, that's it, we're now going to war over this because this is all you're the bad guy. But they're just as equally guilty of doing the same things.
I mean, I'm not going to argue with that. That's a fair point. That said, people would say I have a bias in that. But yeah, no, I get what you mean.
Yeah, but that's the part where I'm able to take a step back. I organized public Poshfin fleets, and at one point they became actively targeted. It might have even gone as far as people getting in comms and just like, oh, they're going there, camp there, groups there. We're going to get them. We're going to kill them because we have all this information, and that's part of the game. Like, you adapt, or you have to make different decisions. So things happening in nullsec or reasoning, I'm just taking a step back. Things are happening, and the entire economy change that is happening, I can understand that it's extremely painful and people are upset about it, but at the same time, I can take a step back and say, this is a good thing. Because how things worked in the past was everything just went, you started at one point, and if you went to low sec, things became more available, and if you went to null sec, there was even more available. So things just picked up exponentially. And that just caused a lot of issues over time where people could whelp like 100 dreads on a weekly basis and it wouldn't affect them one way or the other. And that's just not good for the game overall. So the changes they're making now, by just separating the different parts, like you got some things you can only get in high sec, some things you can only find in low sec, some things you only get in null sec. It gives you a much better ability to keep an eye on the economy, the entire availability of resources, and step in before things get completely out of hand.
It sounds like we've transitioned onto a topic that Stream wanted to get us to address, and it's not like we haven't addressed it before, and it's not like it's not been in the media. But of course, if we insist to talk about industry changes, by all means, let's talk about industry changes.
Well, just
No, it's
just to
it's
take a moment.
examples, right? It's examples, and it's just the part where, sure, it affects you. Like, sure, it affects me, because if you look at things like prices, availability of items or anything else, it's going through the roof in pricing. Availability is going down because there's just a lot of speculators going, okay, let's do it this way because then we'll make a quick buck after everything has gone live. And that's something you need to deal with. But that still doesn't mean I'm able to take an objective step back and say, yes, it hurts, yes, it sucks right now, but for the longevity and in the long run, this needs to be done. So let's not
So you're
bitch or
appealing to
whine
the
about it.
Calebs of the world.
Let's get it through.
So just to play devil's advocate here for a moment. What's wrong with people being able to whelp 100 dreads a week?
Just to correct Renders here, he is representing himself in this scenario, so it's literally the devil doing devil's advocate.
Okay,
Thanks, Caleb.
fair enough. It's look,
No,
if
I'm curious, you know.
whelping 100 threads a week in itself isn't an issue, but if you can do it and it's not going to have any impact whatsoever, something isn't right. Because it's like you're just throwing. It's the part where you could say, if you just throw enough dreadnoughts and ISK at it, we're going to fix a problem one way or the other.
Hi,
And
I'm from business school. Can I help? If you are able to whelp 100 dreads a week, that also means that you are able to build 100 dreads a week. So that should really be the correct question, right?
Well, my question is about, you know, the destruction, because if you whelp 100 dreads a week, then you need to replace 100 dreads a week, and doesn't that drive the economy?
Yeah, and if you are capable of doing that easily, isn't that a problem?
Oh dear God, this is
it?
Dutch.
Well, of course, if the right amount of manpowers and man hours are being thrown at it, sure. But if it's not, if it's mediocre or even low effort replacement,
Caleb,
then it's not healthy for the game.
Caleb,
relax.
The question was for Dutch.
Sorry.
Yep, and he took the words right off my mouth, and I was like, "Oh, damn it! There goes my answer." But hey,
I mean, you know, unless you're running for CSM, Caleb, really, we want the answers from Dutch.
There is no ability of write-ins in the CSM the way that it's run. So no, you can't force me in there.
I'm not trying to. I'm just pointing out that, you know,
force you in there. Sorry, I'm fine.
That's almost as evil as trying to kick people out of the game, isn't it?
Let the man finish.
But yeah, either way, this is just the part where it's solid questions. They're not easy questions, and some questions don't necessarily have a quick yes or no or a black and white answer because of how interconnected a lot of things are. But do keep the questions coming, and I'll try to step in before Caleb answers the question I want to give.
We have a guest. These are for the guest first. Then you can.
What
answer.
about the cookies? Are they also only for the guests,
Yes,
or can I
Yes.
eat them?
cookies are definitely for the guest.
As soon
Not
as
for
Arendis
Caleb.
asked that, I was just there like, oh god, this is gonna.
John
it
push
is-
to talk. They've got cookies.
So, because a lot of people in chat, and I guarantee a lot of people that do watch the CSM things, don't care necessarily about your resume. Dear God, Kenneth Feld made it to CSM, so clearly no one cares. It's gonna be about how are you going to represent the game, as well as maybe their whatever they're worried about. Because Omeka got on, and at first we were like, oh, he could be a meme candidate. That's fine. He can't do that much trouble. But then we started, hearing what he really wanted to do, which is destroy a huge part of gameplay and make it worthless. And by gum, CCP were like, sounds great, let's do it. And now viable capital play is pretty much limited to shooting buildings.
And then
Or
the
like
ecosystem
hot drop
team
a clock.
was inserted and saved us from all the Olmeca ideas.
I'm gonna defend Dutch here, right? Like, you probably don't need it, Dutch, but in my experience talking with Dutch and working with him with all the Trig content and ARC related stuff in the past, he is not an Olmeca, right? You might disagree on ideas such as industry, but Dutch at least comes from a sensible viewpoint on it.
Thank you for those kind words, but they are true. Yeah. But the thing is, no matter what you're running for, if you're running on the CSM, you will always get flag because there's a certain idea about how the CSM works, and that has changed. It's not if you say this is what I want to run for, and this is just me grabbing a random example again, like the angel capitals. Like, I'm gonna make sure those angel capitals get into the game. That's not a promise that I'm going to make, because I've done my research. I know that's not how the CSM works. The CSM is the part where CCP reaches out to players with their expertise in game to provide feedback on directions they want to take it. And it could also happen, and I love this expression and the definition from Mike Esdrai, who said there's going to be points where it's just about controlling the fall, because CCP could say things, this is going to happen, and there's no discussion, it's going to happen. And then that's the part where you're going to fall down, but then it's about controlling the fall. Where are you going to land? And if you understand your role and how the CSM operates, and you get in on it, you don't have false promises. And one of the things that everybody who has interacted with me in the past will be able to agree upon is I'm approachable. I'm not gonna have, this is my idea, this is the only way. Like, if you have an issue, if you have ideas, please bring them forward. I will give credit where credit is due. I'm not gonna snatch an idea and run with it as if it's my own and it's only me and take all the credit. That's not how it should work, and that's not how I operate.
I was about to say that you could potentially easily put the angels thing on your ballot and then claim victory, because if I'm not mistaken, there seemed to be a placeholder, at least on Hobo, that is already there. It's just it doesn't have art yet. So I think it's coming very soon.
I
We're
do
never
believe
gonna
there's
get those.
conceptual
So
art already, actually.
So you could claim victory when CCP finishes it.
We're never gonna get them. Now,
No, I
the
think
reason
we
why
are.
I
I think
asked
they're just finishing the artwork is my suspicion, right? Because
No,
I
but
think they're there already
but
with
another
all the
thing,
stats.
like, one of the things that you'll also regularly hear is people in there, like, a person gets on the CSM and they're there just to push for their content. They want to help themselves. And I don't interact that way. Like, with chapter 1 and chapter 2 of the Triglavian invasions, CCP reached out, got on the ARC Discord, and it's like, hey, we'd like to know more about how you're running this content. And one of the things is I gave a full rundown on these are our findings, this is how we run it. And one of the things we quickly identified is what we labeled anger management. If you have strong logi and you have one of your logi ships put out all the reps and the others a little less, you're going to have full Triglavian aggro on that one logi, and it's going to stay on that one logi. And that leaves up for a lot of mismanagement where it's just like we can redirect all the aggression and damage on one tanky ship and it's guaranteed to work that way and it's going to stay on it, so everything else just bring glass cannons. That's broken. That's not how you would want to interact, or it could even go as far as with the biggest site in chapter 1, the World Arc Proving Ground. If two groups go in and one group is sitting on the complete opposite side and they have invested in super expensive wrappers and the best there are, and they put them on a nester, they're going to draw all the aggression towards that group, even if the other group is a much better equipped to be able to clear that site, just because of how the mechanics work with the aggression, because that's a bigger wrapper that has to go first. Like, we identified that, and instead of staying quiet about it, I just put it down. Like, hey, this is something you need to look into because this is not good for the game. And yes, it hurts how we're interacting with it. Figuring out how to deal with the different doomsdays. We published the details with a report like, hey, this is how you do it. We could have stayed quiet, we could have hoarded it, and then none would be the wiser on how it actually worked. But that's not what I'm about. That's not what ARC is about. But most of all, that's not. It just shows how I view the game, how I interact with the game, and what you can expect from me if I make it on the CSM, because it's about the game overall and not pushing something that would benefit any group I might have relationships with. It's like, if it hurts something I'm interacting with, but it's better for the game, get it done, get it into the game.
Now, I have a question. So obviously CCP is making some very tough changes this year that not everyone likes.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to the person who comes to you, who's maybe 2-3 years old? They've been skilling into something that they found they really like to do, and CCP has just nuked it. What do you tell them when they come like bitching to you about it? Like, why did you let them do this? Why would you think this is okay? What do you tell somebody who's spent a ton of time learning how to do something?
It depends strongly on what it is that's getting nuked. Like, the changes to the Rorqual. I mean, it sucked balls with the changes to. They called it a fax fix, but the Rorquals were hit really hard with the auxiliary capital shield wrappers. Like, it's the part where, yes, it sucks. You lost this one thing you really wanted to do, but that doesn't mean you still can't do it. It's just different. And I would help that person, like, okay, what's the reason why you want to do this? And just guide them towards the part where I'm going to say your anger is wrong, or this is necessarily good for your play style, but changes happen. Things happen, things change, and what happens, and it's perfectly fine this year, could be next to impossible the next. Part of the things is growing and trying to find opportunities to go with the flow of what's happening in Eve as a universe. And instead of, this is what I wanted to do, I can't do it the way I wanted to do it, so now I can't do it. It's like, no, you can't do it that way, but there could be other ways.
Oh, no.
And I would try to help them still do what they wanted to do and not feel like, okay, now I can't do it at all.
Yeah, because this past year has been pretty hard on a lot of people with how they like to play,
Mm-hmm.
and you see, and in my group as well as the people that I talk with outside my group, some of them have said CCP just keeps taking my money and they keep wasting my time because I spent this much time learning a skill. It takes, to give you an idea, to be able to be a full Titan pilot in Goonswarm, like to be fully qualified, it takes, if you don't skill inject at all, it takes 250 days of just Titan skills. And now my Titan
Mm-hmm.
is a giant paperweight that dies if someone breathes on it.
Does it though?
Yes, that's all it shoots buildings and shoots other capitals. And other
Yeah, okay.
capitals, what do? Shoot capitals. They don't
Mhm.
do anything else. They took every functionality away from the Titan other than bridging. So now I have a 250 billionist bridge that shoots buildings. That's all it
Mhm.
does. But I've
Yeah.
spent almost a year learning how to use it. So those are the
Mhm.
kinds of things that CSM end up hearing, because I know Brisk has heard all of us bitch about it. Nom Nom and Merc, especially Merc, since he deals with all the newbies. And, you know, people are going to come to you with those questions. Are you going to advocate for CCP to not nuke styles? Or like, how do you said, like, oh, you just can't do it that way. Well, sometimes there's just no way to do what you wanted to do anymore. Like, I can't boson rat anymore. Maybe that probably wasn't good for the game per se, but like that, you can't physically do that anymore. It doesn't work.
Mhm.
Like it
Yeah.
won't kill frigates.
Yeah, that's the part where it's hard, and some things just there's no fix. Like, people, if they're complaining about something, they would be in their full rights to complain it, and there's no way to say um uh, like you're wrong or there's an alternative way. On the other hand, there is this part where it's easy to put all the blame on CCP when a lot of the issues are also directly tied to what players do as a whole. So it's not just things mechanically, but it's also how we as a player group, as the entire player base of EVE Online, interact with it. And just the big Serenity blue ball or the blue donut in nullsec, where it's just one group dominating all of nullsec. That's not, like, if that happened on our server and not on Serenity, that's not up to CCP. That's completely player driven. And if things go in a certain way where you as a company responsible for the game in general say, hey, this is going a wrong way, we have to step in. There's parts where, like, it's going to hurt and there's nothing you can do about it, and but that's not always the fault of CCP. We as a player also have a responsibility in that.
Well, I am inclined to disagree, because it is the player's job to min max and figure out how to optimize their gameplay, and they will always do so. It's also natural human behavior to opt for peace when it's beneficial, right? So that's really not the players doing anything wrong. On the contrary, and back to, well, I know it's pseudo biblical, but if the humans decide to start baking a blue donut, it's up to the gods to actually squish it. That's just the way it works.
Yeah, then on the other hand,
Good reason.
min-maxing, getting the max out of how you want to play the game, that's perfectly fine. But there isn't a single way to play the game. There are so many different ways in which you can play the game.
But it's about human behavior, and ironically, CCP actually stands for crowd control production, right? They're supposed to understand human behavior, so they need to create the designs that disrupts or nudges or manipulates or pushes the players to do things that might not be natural human behavior. You want to instigate and incentivize conflict and war. You want to allow a playing field where perfection is difficult, if not near impossible. All of these things is basically what we've been, well, at least I have been asking CCP to try and fix for the past 5+ years, because they went down the exact opposite route. And they are the only ones to blame for the stagnation that we got. They designed the original raw core. They gave us infinitely spawnable anomalies for mining. They basically gave us all the things that made it possible to plaster the entirety of Imperium space with structures in the thousands. They gave us several hundred of Titans with low effort. Everything that was wrong in EVE Online was CCP's fault, not the players.
We just use the tools. It's just like, um, there were a lot of bugs about how things work, like with the jump clones and stuff. We let CCP know about the there was a something about where your corp office would allow you to like jump clone for free when you shouldn't have been able to or something. I don't know the specific details, but I remember basically PL was using it against us for like a year to drop bombers and dreads on us without having to actually follow the correct jump clone mechanics. We told them that the CCP completely ignored us. It took us using it and using it en masse for them to be like, oh, okay, we use the tools over there. They said everything's working as intended, but it was a problem, and it was all CCP's doing. We just
Yeah.
use the tools that were given.
But at the same time, and this is just a quick reference to a saying, like, you can't make things foolproof because fools are so damn inventive. Like, look at certain things were designed, and if you have a certain plan in mind, you don't know how players are going to interact and run with it. Like,
Very
some
true.
things can surprise you in a good way, other things could just happen over time where there's later iterations, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 years down the road, and all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, this interacts in a completely unintended way with content from 10 years back, and that creates a situation that is going to take some time to figure out how to correct that properly. So
Yeah.
just because we players are so incredibly talented in finding loopholes or squeezing the best possible way out of how mechanics work in a certain way, there's no way any gaming company will ever be able to get that covered with a player base such as that we have in EVE Online. What you can have is, and this is something that I also talked about on the EVE Universe show yesterday in an interview, is you could be blindsided because if you're developing something and it's new, you want to create an incentive for players to interact with it. So it needs to be interesting.
Well, but how do you feel about the fact that there's another side to this story that actually Moomin brought up? Because, of course, he's the Minister of Truthiness. The CSM actually warned CCP about many of these issues before they introduced them. How do you feel about the fact that you're going to be sitting, potentially warning CCP about these things, and get ignored?
It's gonna suck. It's gonna hurt, especially if things you warned about do come to pass. It's like, we warned you about this. Um, but for me, and this is something I've had to deal with as a player, like, things happen and all of a sudden it's you warned it's happening and it's done. So you could stop and complain and bitch and say this is wrong, you need to fix it, or you could say, okay, this has happened. There's no turning back. Let's use what we can to make it, and this is if you're looking at it as a pessimist, to make it less bad the next time it happens. I prefer to be more optimistic and say, let's build upon this to make the next similar situation better, where it actually helps in, and instead of, we warned you about it, CCP didn't listen, and it still happened, and we're just not going to provide any more input. It's a tough balancing act, and it's something, because I've done my research, I do know that this is something that could happen, and then it's up to the CSM. They're in the crossfire as well, and they will take flack for it, and that's not going to be easy. And thankfully, we have experienced people that have been dealing with it before and know how to handle it appropriately. And for this, Brisker Ball is definitely one of the people who say how he has been communicating and how he's been replying to things. At least what I've been able to discover on the public front is an example. And I have taken notes, and I would love to get on the same page and handle things in the same way. But yeah, it's I am aware that it could happen. It's probably going to happen, but it's not going to prevent me from running for the CSM and um, giving my best shot at it again and again and again and again.
Now, what has been your favorite change so far and least favorite change in this past, scarcity era, basically starting from January of last year.
Okay, so one thing I like is the inclusion of different parts for building capitals and battleships. Like, yes,
Ah!
it hurts. No, hang on,
Ah!
hang on, hang on, hang on. I understand that reaction completely, but here's the thing. Eve isn't a single player game. You can play it on your own. That's perfectly fine. But if you play it with a group, it gets so much better. So having the option to have other ways to interact, like hey, you got different parts, and all of a sudden the wormhole economy with gases or anything else, they have a different use, because this is something I had people complain about last year to me, like hey, this is something that I want you to be aware of. And it's a good step forward to include other things where you no longer have to make sure that you got the entire vertical chain on your own, on a single person. Like you could delegate
Hey.
it to other people. I think that's a good thing, and I do understand not everybody's going to agree with me on that.
Which one of you can put this in Twitch chat? Because I want everyone to look at that. I don't know. This is a link to the build tree for a Titan. I can't put it in because I don't have the roles on the Twitch chat, but one of you guys do it. Hopefully. Caleb, you can, right?
Yep. Give me a sec.
Okay. Yeah, so we went from, some cat parts to like this confuckery over here. It makes me want to cry just looking at it. It's just like it's impossible.
I'm trying, but I don't have anything that is actually being leaked right now to see. Sorry.
It's in the you can't see. It's in Twitch
I'll
chat
DM
now.
you, Dutch.
But in Twitch chat, you guys can open that up. That is a tree of every part it takes and what parts go into what to make a Titan. There are a lot of lines.
And again, I would be more inclined to actually applaud this, but of course, I do agree that there's a small issue. I do think that the bifurcation of the tree is a little bit off and wrong. Like there's too many items at some of the stages, which is bad because it messes up the whole industry UI and stuff like that. But in general, raising the verticality like this, I think, is really what the doctor ordered.
I mean, I'm split somewhere in the middle. In one hand, I'm there like these changes annoy me, but I can see the intent and the need. Right? I expect you agree, Caleb. We've had this conversation. I expect Dutch would agree as well.
I think the problem is that to really have this discussion, I think someone would need to actually do some better analysis, because what we really need to do is compare things like total industry hours before and after in a proper way, and say at which stages are these going up and at which might they actually be going down or staying flat. There's many things that we need to consider, and then again, I always come back to the fact that I don't agree with the rollout of the order and priority of the current ecosystem team. I think they've made a lot of mistakes. I think the fact that they haven't fixed the what I call the upside down world problems in EVE Online really bothers me. An active system should not be something that is bad for you. It should be something that benefits you. There should be a downside, but primarily there should be an upside. If there is a lot of industrial activity, that should actually make industry more efficient, right? It shouldn't go the other way. It should make it more expensive, so you have to prioritize when it comes to price. And this brings in the fact that if you look at something like cost of install jobs, it's just dumb, because you would never have a rent of, say, industrial real estate be based on a percentage take of your profit. They don't become co-owners, so those prices needs to be flat, and they need to be based on how much is 1 hour costing you, and that should be tied into things like fueling. There's so many things that CCP could and should have done instead. And of course, my main one is the fact that I have limited market orders but unlimited industry slots. It should be the other way around. Come on, CCP, grow a brain.
Now I want to.
There's different issues happening over time. Like, to get back on things, like the most recent one, the tree, like it's the changes, they hurt. Absolutely. It's better for the game, but for the people in the industry, the builders, it hurts. And one of the things that people jump to conclusions to is they're looking at the current market situation, which is incredibly overheated with all the speculations, with the hoarder saying it's going to get worse, so I need to get all these parts I might need, and people speculating like this is going to be a rise, so I buy it to make a big profit. So any projections you make based on the current situation is not how it's going to be once things settle and calm down. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. On the other hand, in the early days, building different ships needed different minerals from different ores that you could find in those specific parts in space. And players weren't happy because it complicated things. They wanted it to be more simple. So CCP at one point agreed, they made the changes, and then things took off, and we're now at the point where people say, but yeah, now it's gotten too simple. There's too much strength, so it's being changed up again to where they're looking like certain ore and minerals are going to be in different parts, and then it's still not good because people aren't happy with that, even though it was there in the game before, and it's like, no, this isn't working, you need to change it. And then it was changed, and it's like, no, this isn't working, and we want it back how it was. And then it's there, and there's still a mass feedback like, this isn't what we want, you need to change it. There's no way to get it right where everybody's going to be happy. And with social media and all the availability, like, it's really easy for a minority, and I take this very loosely, but for a small group to be very vocal, and then people hear it so often, they'll start running with it, even if it doesn't have to be as bad as people are currently very vocally saying.
I feel personally attacked right now.
Oh,
No,
sure.
I mean,
It's not a personal attack. It's not
I
intended
know.
as a personal attack. But
Dutch is basic. Sorry, man. I was just going to say, you're basically saying what Caleb's, in a way, said to us at times in conversations, right? The current prices are, what was the term you used, Caleb? Hype cycle?
Well, right now we're in a hype cycle. This is what
You
happens
say
every
it'll
time
go down in a month, but it's
every
don't
time we
believe
have
it.
a big patch and new things coming in and things changing in massive ways, you get a hype cycle, and it's easy to analyze that if you just Google hype cycle, and then you can see exactly what it does. And it's done this almost every single time in EVE Online, right? So
Yeah.
this is not new, and we are completely at the peak, and it's dumb pricing. These things will correct themselves, and people will figure out what to do. The interesting thing in this is that some of the jobs that are going to be required for this new industry is what I would call hated jobs that people don't want to do. And I don't
Gas
think it's
mining.
I don't think it's a good idea for CCP to massively force people into things that they don't like doing. So I think there's a little bit of a balance issue on that. And then, of course, the whole way that this industry patch has been rolled out and discussed with the CSM is a contentious and hot topic that I don't think we have time to discuss now. It's been covered a little bit before, because many of the CSM members have actually not had any say or look-see at these things.
Why wouldn't you have time now? No fireside until tomorrow.
This is true, but I also want to, because I kind of want to steer us onto a topic where you are actually important, Arendis, because I
But
want to ask
I am leaving because I got
Yeah.
a meeting like now.
for fuck's sake, I tried to time this.
You did time it.
Anyway,
Exactly wrong.
Okay.
Dutch was going to say something. I'll let him.
Before Arendis goes, I will just point out that his semi-prediction from almost 6 months ago seems to actually be happening now, with the law events and the potential of the four-way Empire Wars coming out. So I would just say,
No.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that. I
Hold
know
on.
nothing.
We've
That's
got
not-
Dutch
that's not
here,
that.
right? Let's get Dutch's opinion,
The
because
lore,
you're involved in that.
masters.
Yeah,
Mhm.
there you go.
completely different turn, but sure, ask away.
Well, I don't. Okay, I don't know anything other than capitals are showing up in high sec and that's it. And then
She's
something
lucky
about
she
Kate.
knows that much.
That's about as much as I know. So I'm gonna go grab
Okay.
a drink. I need some liquid, and I'll be back. And then you can
this
explain.
is because Dawn is usually looking at her cold and checking out how much is filling or not. So she rarely looks up from that. Other than that, she usually shoots dudes in the face. So stuff like reading lore and news is not really on her
If
radar.
you guys are still going, when I get done, I'll be back. Bye.
All right, Aringus.
Thanks, Horrendous.
Well, I didn't formulate this as a question, but maybe I should, because I would actually like Dutch Gunner to try and do his personal too long didn't read about the recent events in high sec based around law and the empires, because I've kind of followed them, and then I tried to watch the law stream that Ash and friends were doing, and he went straight into the weeds, and I was lost. And like, okay, could we have the shorter version?
Okay. The empires have had a long, shaky peace, with the Elder invasions to shaken up by taking down Concord for a time, which resulted in a massive war and the foundation for faction warfare.
But that's a proxy war, right? Can we agree on that?
Yes and no. Like there's the part where, on the one hand, there's lore, and on the other hand, Eve is a game. So things that would work if you look at it strictly from a lore or story perspective are completely different towards it still needs to be playable or a fun experience for players to interact with, because otherwise you're not really getting anywhere. And thank you very much for that note with Eve is not a simulation. It's a game, correct.
I disagree.
So there's a balancing
Greg-
act.
It's a simulation with game aspects. And again, this is back to
Greg just
exactly
likes to make
one of my
notes.
beefs with faction warfare, is that
Right,
it has
right.
no proper meaning, and it's not really something that I care enough about, because it feels like it's instant. It's over gamified, and it doesn't do anything to the RP, to the lore, to the political scene, to the universe. This is why I had to eat my hat when it came to the whole Poshwin thing, because that whole Triglavian invasion event actually had meaningful changes in the game. So that really ended up mattering to the rest of the universe. So I had to actually acknowledge that and admit to Ash that, okay, PvE can actually be meaningful and something worth having news about. But other than that, in the past, I haven't cared about lore or any law news related stuff at all, because it doesn't do anything. It has no impact. The only thing it could be used for was predicting small changes that the gods, aka CCP, was actually going to introduce, so new items or things like that, right? But other than that, law was meaningless. With Triglavians, it became meaningful, and I'm just hoping that what we're seeing now could be the steps towards an actual, almost invasion-like faction warfare. So a proper heating up of the war between the empires,
So
where
what's
you
happening?
change the scenario, where you
Yes.
get borders that move, and standings that mean that if you are actually flying into a quote unquote war zone with even remotely bad standing with that faction of the empires, you will get shot.
We already get shot. That's a
Yeah.
fact, though.
But
What is happening? Because
Yeah.
I told you I had to get a drink and I walked away,
Mhm.
and then you all started talking about faction warfare. What is actually happening? Like, I know capitals are arriving and people are like pew 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 at each other, but that's about it.
Yeah. So there's it's something is happening, but what is, like, sure, we know what's happening. Capital ships, dreadnoughts are being sighted, and they're shooting planets, and that in itself is extremely rare, because capital weaponry being fired at planets, the impact it has if it hits and nothing is done against it is catastrophic for the planet itself. It has such a massive impact. And what's happening right now is there is a shaky peace between the different empires, where you have the Amar and the Kaldari on one side, you have the Minmatar, the Galente on the other side, and something is happening that has triggered a Minmatar group to attack a capital planet in a home system. And how it works in the
Uphill.
lore. Like how it works in lore is you're not able to light a cyno to get capitals in high sec unless defenses are down, and that's a big deal. So Amar going in, they're shooting planets. The Minotaur going in, they're shooting planets. We don't know what's happening. We know, but we don't know the reason behind it. So naturally, people in charge, so the Minotaur Republic, it's the Minotaur fleet is like, guys, what's happening is like, we didn't order it. They're mercenaries. We didn't authorize this. So that just adds to the mystery of what's happening, even though, something big. Then what happened was the Amar struck back, and they struck back in a system that has both Minotaur fortifications and a command center for that part of space, but also Galente. So then the Galente took it as like, hey, sure, you went after the Minotaur, but you could have gone after us as well. So we take it as a threat. We're not going to take it lying down. And then the latest was that the Galente struck. But all of these attacks were done by mercenary groups.
I feel like that was just poor planning. Like, I feel like a military leader of any kind would know, like, hey, we don't want to like stir people up on
That's
the
not.
wrong side.
Well, you've been
But that's the
following the
part.
player wall, right? So
But that's the part where if you're like either you're interested now or if you've been interested before, just seeing these things could be a prelude to like, okay, so something is afoot, something is happening. CCP did a fantastic job leading up to the Sancha incursions where there were hints and snippets and puzzles, and if people figured it out, they would be able to predict this system is next and it's going to be roughly at that time. And that's the part where I find it interesting that Caleb mentioned, like, it hasn't mattered before. Like, yes, it does, but people were not generally aware of where to find the information or pay attention to the information that was out there. Like Caroline Starr, a player saw it, it's like, hey, what's happening? Because they paid attention. And things got rolling, and that became a really big thing and a prelude to the entire Drifter story arc and wormhole space. So there's just so many things that if you're interested, and you don't have to be a lore specialist where you know all the ins and outs. Like, you don't have to do that to still be able to interact with it. And the lore is great with things such as the Prelude to Faction Warfare for people who are interested, roleplay organizations such as CVA, Pi, Alexis Batari, Ushrakan, to say, okay, you know what? This is a good reason for us to start doing things, and we have an option, and it's what we make of it, but we have something we can roll with, and we're going to own it, and we're going to make it our story. And that's the part what's so fascinating about lore and lore related content. And that's one of the reasons why I included it in the platform, because ARC as a group is one of the groups that has been paying attention to that in the past, still currently, and they're rolling with it. And it's a fantastic thing to do things, get people in. It's like, oh wait, I didn't know about it. They start digging into it, and all of a sudden they make a discovery or they raise a point in a discussion, and you start figuring out like, okay, so what's happening? What's the reasoning behind it? And you just can expand upon it and do so many things as a player because you choose to do so. But
I'm just sad that all the lore stuff's in high sec, because I will never get to engage in it and enjoy it. So,
but it
I would
doesn't. It
say for
doesn't.
now.
Like, here's the thing. It doesn't have to be restricted to just high sec. I think it's, on the one hand, it's a good thing that a lot of it is happening in high sec, because there's people who are not interested in the null sec playstyle. They don't care about that either because they don't have the time, or they don't relax playing it that way. And having this way, they still have things like, hey, I like it. There's group activities. I can still get involved in bigger things that way. At the same time, with the creation of Edencom, there's so many possibilities, because how it worked with the standings was, if you sided with the Triglavians, you would take standing hits with Edencom, not with the empires. So having Edencom, you could start looking at the option of saying, okay, there's pirate factions in nullsec, there's lowsec. What if those pirate factions start intruding, invading, or fighting over lowsec? you have Edencom, and then people once again have an option to say, okay, I'm going to pick this side or I'm going to pick that side.
No one in their right mind will pick Edencom ever again, clearly.
Well,
Yeah,
depending
but
on what they do to
that's
them,
how
right?
it was. That was how it was handled, because I'm pretty sure that if Sancha or Blood Raiders start going after Amar Losec, groups like CVA and Pi, they will side with Edencom to support to defend their empire against the pirates. But it's the part where there's a lot of potential, but there's a big discrepancy between siding with the Triglavians and Edencom that players are not likely to either get involved and pick a side, or they're not going to side with Edencom. So that's a really tricky situation to balance. But running with it and doing something like Pirate Factions versus Edencom, it opens up so many possibilities for so many people to get involved, and you can create an incentive for people to start moving out of high sec into low sec if they want to.
Also,
So there's a lot of opportunities.
I guess I don't know how I'm going to explain this, but I guess if they start doing pirate factions as well, and they start using, say, the main 4 pirate factions, being what Serpentis, Greasters,
Does.
Angel, and Blood Rangers, Blood Raiders.
Rangers.
Yeah,
Blood
they can
Rangers.
kind of do and they can avoid the pitfalls of the Trigs, right? Because the Trigs, they wanted that storyline of systems went missing, so Trigs had to win, right?
Yeah.
So Edencom had to take the loss there. That was the issue, right? At least we're doing with 4 pirate factions. They can let players dictate to a higher degree by letting the players have the say and not guiding which one. As long as one wins, CCP have got an outcome that they might want, right?
Yeah, or alternatively, like you could say, and this is just me spitballing. Like, okay, let's say Serpentis is going in against the Galente Federation, and they win, and they now take ownership over many different low-sec systems. And a year later, or a year and a half later, Federation has been able to replenish their losses, and they're going to make a push back. Like, it still had a lasting impact, but this is just an option that could be implemented. And it still creates for a very meaningful impact in the game. And it's learning what happened with the Triglavians to be able to balance both sides, where it's not one thing has everything and the other is like you put the effort and then being told, yeah, you get to keep things the same, and things can only get worse with security standing can only go down, but it can't go up. Like that's a really, it feels bad if you're on that side for whatever reason. It feels unbalanced. So taking those lessons and moving forward from that is fully within the realm of possibilities. And that's one of the things where I'm very well suited for to provide input on. And that's why my specialty, if you will, or my platform is on lore and lore related content, even though it's not the only thing I can interact with. But that's my specialty. That's my expertise for the time being.
God, I'm just imagining having you and Uriel on, which would be absolutely amazing and hilarious.
I'm not sure if you're aware, Dutch, but our very own Dawn Rhea is a little bit of a lore specialist, and she's also been known to write some fan fiction.
Oh my God, Greg.
Oh dear God, no! Please no. Ignore what he just said.
I will
ignore
say, I love world building, and I wish that CCP would incorporate more options to, instead of less hard gameplay where you're like shooting ships, but had, the walking in stations thing, but not just be like sitting on your couch watching Eve TV, but like actually being able to.
I think I know what you want them to be able to do. I'm not sure that's
No,
going to be
I mean, just in general, being able to interact with each other's characters would enhance the role-playing community. but also it would enhance that camaraderie with people who maybe are shy about interacting with others, but also you can ignore it. You don't have to do it. I wish
Mhm.
that's something that I would love to see is CCP delving into the fact that like, we're in space with immortal bodies.
Oh, I know what
There's
you want to be
so
able to
much
do.
you
You,
could
you, you want to
do.
you want to
We
be
can
able to
still
do
die.
what they did in that Netflix series, right? Where he steals his mom's clone.
Like that, you
What the
know?
fuck?
I'm just here
What
like, what?
series is
Altered
that?
Carbon.
Yeah.
That's
The thing
what's
is-
it called? The carbon something.
Oh, Altered Carbon.
Yeah,
Oh,
Altered
yeah,
Carbon.
that's good
Carbon,
stuff.
yeah.
Altered Carbon is basically
Yeah.
Eve, just like pre super
it
space
is,
form,
yeah.
right? Which is great. And even though, like, yes, I write, spicy fan fiction, but in my fan fiction, I try to do a little world building in there. And I've thought about, the spy game in Eve, unless they, explicitly lay out more details, you could change your body's appearance and infiltrate groups all the time.
Dawn,
But-
there's lore about this.
I've
There's
read a
genuinely
little bit of
lore about
lore.
it.
I've read a little bit of lore, but not much because it's usually too long and winded, and Amar is all very hoity-toity or whatever.
Well, Don, you
But-
actually
Dutch.
figured out how many stories a Keepstar was.
We
didn't
did.
you?
We did count. Okay, this is how bored Theta gets at night. So in my story, I said I was on floor 500, and then we were like, wait a minute, that's too few floors. Okay, how many stories would an average Keepstar have? So we did the math. Okay, it's 100 kilometers tall, and it's 10 feet for an average, ceiling or whatever it was, right? It's 50,000 floors.
Jesus Christ.
Of standard height floors. Obviously, you
Yeah.
could have tall and short places, but I was like, oh, okay, well, 500 just the number of the top block. That's just what I changed it to instead.
Yeah, but
But-
still, I mean, having
but
that
it was
like
fun.
with that number, it makes sense that once the first Keepstar started blowing up, or the ones still under constructions, the Scope News did report like on millions of residents losing their lives because it blew up. Like if you have that many stories, it fits, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the fun stuff that we do. But we have these giant buildings. We have all these people. We have immortal bodies. Why is there no like fun RP part of it? Like not where we just make it up, but like something in the game to interact with. Obviously, people like the PP spaceships. But
Yeah, we should
there's a
definitely.
whole nother side of this game. They can make an Eve Life or some spin-off game of Eve where like you can move your character into it. And that I guarantee they'd get plenty of people to play that.
Eve
It'd be like
Online,
Eve Sims Eve.
the
things like
erotic
that.
chapters.
That depends where you want to go, but like figuring that out, the stories, the residents, like that's also things that you could definitely consider to be interacting with lore. Because
I mean, that was
details, like figure it out and then run with it. Like that's part of the charm, and that's also part of the sandbox. And one of the things that I really like is that at chapter 2, when Ark cracked the importance of blue stars, real like out of game news reporters, like people were word at CCP that they had a leak because so many of it was on point.
Yeah, I didn't remember that. They were like, how did they know?
Yeah, well, but things like that, and the project discoveries and the coverage. So it's just goes to show that not like there's other things that are also newsworthy, and Eve is not just about the big combat. There's also amazing things and things that can be interacted with and achieved if you look at other things, and lore related content is one of those things that has a lot of potential.
yes. There was something I was going to say.
I'm just going to go back and say,
I kind of
but
lost it.
the problem is still if you treat the law only like backdrop, right, on a theater stage, and it's mediocre at best, no one will care, aka give a hoot about you changing any of that if it doesn't impact the rest of the game, right? So I'm back to the fact that I had to eat my hat when Niadia fell, right? Because it
Mhm.
actually changed something. It had an impact. It had meaning. But other than that, there is zero meaning of the lore events in EVE Online.
Right,
I
and then
don't
I'm going to
fully
throw something
agree,
back
but
at
yeah.
you. Then I'm going to throw something back at you. Last year, there was a Trash Talk Tuesday CSM debate, and I repeated what I also still say to this day. Like, there isn't a single way to play EVE, and having things that don't just revolve about combat is a good thing, because there's a lot of sentiment that industry, exploration, or PvE, that's not how the game is supposed to be played. And that's, I personally say, that's bullshit, because there isn't a single way to play EVE. But I got a very passionate reply from Vili, and a couple of weeks ago he went on a talking in station where he said that he wasn't aware how many thousands of players interacted with events like the egg hunt, which is a lore thing. It's like, oh wow, I
Yeah.
didn't know that many people interacted with it. So to say that they don't matter doesn't do it justice, because it clearly does matter to a lot of people.
So I will say, though, to Caleb's point, some of the lore, say old scope videos, right, where it was just, to a degree, it was just fluff, right?
Mhm.
If that makes sense. That, yeah, in the realms of doesn't such matter, unless they're building up to, say, the Trig storyline, because that did become a thing. But now, CCP do seem to be learning from it, and also in the way you're saying of combat's not the only way. Have you seen the little leaks on Hobo Leaks about the next big event they're doing?
I'm trying to stay away from Hobo
Gates
Leagues,
to stain.
but that's the main reason why I try to stay away from Hobo Leagues is
That's Hobo Troll. That's Hobo
Hold
Troll.
on.
getting
Hold
like
on,
no,
let Dutch
but
finish.
being like knowing what's coming could ruin the introduction of it. Like what's happening
Yes,
now with
that's
the
fair.
dreadnoughts in HiSec, like not knowing what it could lead to is part of the fun, because then you can start thinking about it, give your own spin, and then don't be disappointed if things turn out differently than what you thought was going to happen based on what you found in Hobo Leagues.
Yes, that's fair. So I won't spoil it for you, but I will just leave it with the comment of they seem to be learning from that. They
Mhm.
seem to be
It's-
taking the idea that we can have the story we want without screwing over one side or
Mhm.
both sides, and it doesn't just have to be combat.
Exactly. Like one
Right.
of the best events, in my opinion, was the first introductions of the geckos. You had a milestone for kills, and you had a milestone for, I think it was ore that was mined. So all of a sudden, everybody, depending on like, it's not just combat where you could say, I did my part because I helped kill this many things, so this is my part to filling that bar. Industry, like the mining, that was also included, and it didn't feel forced. Like some of the things with the Blood Raider event, where if you wanted to get the boosters, you also needed to start mining the ore that you could only find in those combat anomalies in order to build the boosters. Like that, I can see why it was done, but it still felt forced.
Yeah, and it's always good to, I don't know,
But
make
CCP
different
is
play ways
definitely
available,
learning.
right?
They're
Yeah.
learning, they're giving more options, and using scope videos is a good way for people who are unfamiliar about the world news page on the EVE Online website to see anything happening, whether it's just background information or it could be a prelude to things that are going to be in the game for us to interact with. So having the scope news is a really good way to help put the information out there, and CCP is definitely improving a lot with validating more and acknowledging that EVE is not just about the PvP.
That's fair.
What's a good name for a Weedle, by the way? Anyone?
Any specific context, like a certain theme?
Nope.
What are you trying to name, Don?
A Weedle.
What the fuck's a Weedle?
Pokemon.
Oh my god. Anyways, Dutch.
Spiky bits.
Just a quick question.
call them
How do you
spiky
cut your sandwiches?
Ah ha ha ha.
I cut them straight through the middle.
Yay. Someone who actually cuts a
So you
sandwich.
don't cut them triangularly?
Nope, I cut them straight through the center.
And Dawn, how do you? I don't know if you remember, but Dawn cuts her sandwiches in like little quarters or some shit.
Not all the
Good-
time, but
Because
you know,
Dawn's a
that's the way I like
princess.
it.
That's fine, however you enjoy it.
At least he's not a heathen who's like, I don't cut my sandwiches. I just
Right. Arr. So Dutch,
Right in the mouth.
what do you do outside of EVE Online? Do you have any hobbies?
Yeah, several hobbies, but they're all shut down because of the pandemic.
Yeah, well, like what if
But
there wasn't a
If-
pandemic?
if-
What
if there-
kind of
if there
shit do you
wasn't-
do?
If there wasn't a pandemic, I would have like board game nights with friends, archery, and
Archery. Huh, interesting.
not competitional. Just I find it very relaxing to sit there and to just let loose on the target. And alternatively, and yes, I know this is going to get me flagged. I don't care. I enjoy going to live roleplay events on the weekends. Like it's not every
Nice.
weekend, but there's a couple of things that I find really fun to just go out there, get challenged, and have a lot of fun with friends and just being away from things.
Very interesting. I
That's
was just
fun.
talking about LARPing Eve and how that'd be done. So
Oh,
I
I
think
am still so pissed and upset that I was unable to attend the last FanFest because they had live roleplay during FanFest where you could complete assignments, you get a ticket, and you could vote on how to resolve the Kiyanoke crisis.
yeah.
That's
Oh,
a
yeah,
perfect example of
Kiyanoke.
what you could do. And
You
I'm
see,
still
my
so
idea-
bummed out I missed it.
My idea was that you put a space helmet on and you get in your fucking chest freezer, and then you pretend you're like in actually outer space. Please
Well,
please don't do that, listeners. Please do not fucking lock yourself in your chest freezer. That's very dangerous. People have died from that.
Well, I'm just going to go with an old meme. Like, it depends on what you'll be role playing. If you want to go for the Minotaur experience, just sit on a wheelchair with oozes and go down a flight of chairs. Welcome to the Minotaur experience.
Yeah, lots of rust everywhere too.
Don, has anyone ever? Do you think anyone's ever live action role played your fan fiction?
Yes.
See, I think Dawn should write the script for a LARP event, and it should be named something like.
Oh, it would be the most cliche thing ever.
It should be called like the bonus room experience or something like that.
Whips
Oh,
and
dear Lord.
chains. Whips and
Dear
chains
Lord.
with Don Rea.
No, I mean, there's so many elements that you can use to write about Eve. It would be fun at an event, potentially. It just depends on how committed you can get into it and that no one makes fun of you for it. Doing like having that meeting in the mercenary dark room deciding who to attack next.
Don with her Triglavian nipple clamps.
Oh my god, Greg,
Where are we
Oh,
going?
together. Keep it together.
Straight through the
We're
gutter
not-
and
all
out the other
all
side,
the way
apparently.
down to the gutter. All the way
This
down
is
to the
not
gutter.
Theta Comms. Keep it together.
Oh, sorry.
You need to remember that. That kind of stuff. As I said, I feel like that. I'm not an RPer, like where I'll go play RP in the game, but all my characters have a background together, and I have stories that I've made about my characters, about other people's characters. It's not something I do in game. I wish there was a way to do it in game and actually have maybe some impact or consequences or a valid gameplay style with that.
There is there's a lot of in-character channels, but I would say if you're looking for a more quote-unquote official way, your best bet is basically the Intergalactic Summit, where you have an in-character forum for in-character posts and interactions, and there are some really great role-playing things happening, some where you could say, okay, it's maybe a bit less quality, but sure. But that's probably a good place to go. And other things that there's, I think there is the summit for an in-character, in-game channel, but that's not an quote-unquote official one, I think. But it really comes down to how deep you want to go into the role play rabbit hole, if you like. That's completely up to you.
I just like someone's comment in Twitch chat earlier, and I just brought it up now. Is they're like, man, I want to go shopping in the mall inside a Keepstar.
That would be cool, wouldn't it?
Could you imagine, like, if you for modules, you're wanting to purchase new modules, and they had a market option where you walk in and you can actually shop around for what guns you want on your ship, or and once again, it's completely fluff. You still fit a ship like normal and everything, but you get to go in and interact with other sellers and barkeeps or whatever. Not, I just think
But isn't it?
they're missing out on so much option.
Yeah, but not having it completely filled in, leaving it open for people to give their own twist upon it, isn't that equally rewarding or even more rewarding than just saying, this is how it is, deal with it, or find your way in it? Just
Yeah.
having it out there, filling it with your own imagination, like, this is how I envision it. And you could have one for a player-owned structure, you could have it for an Mars station, a Minmatar, in different parts of space, but that's part of the fun where there's a lot you can fill in for yourself, and you can talk about it with others, and then share notes, compare notes, or have a debate on why something would work and other things wouldn't work.
You could negotiate favors for a special deal.
I know, I'm a dork. I
But
actually
seriously, Dawn, I really want to know, when are you going to start writing some fan fiction where it's based around characters like Knighton's character? Because there's some great art for that. Maybe a small series about events at Hellcats meets and stuff like that, and even maybe more leather and lace. Something with Jamil Sarum. I'm just
you bring up
thinking.
all these people that I don't know who you're talking about, but that's okay.
I just linked it.
Jamil Sarum was the previous Amar Empress who got one-shotted by drifters.
No, Jamila's not dead. I promise you, Jamila's not dead.
I'm not interested in interacting with in-game characters that CCP made up. I like working with the characters people have made up. I like one of the stories. Now it's not my name's not on the story, but I edited it and honestly wrote about half of it. I made a story about what it was like, or like what the first time joining 1DQ was like, or Karma Fleet, and it's about going to so 1DQ's main planet was a barren planet that we had everything on. So we, me and my co-author created a city that's kind of like run down, desolate. It's got sandstorms all the time, so most people don't stay on the planet itself. It's just there for integration. And then you went to go meet Nolak. And then there was an interaction with Nolak, who's a loan shark, and that was a lot of fun to write out. But yeah, see,
I would love to read some of it now.
Oh well, there's a lot of penises and vaginas though, so I don't know how into that.
Yeah, I'll just skip over that if it's just about that. Like, I'm interested in the story, not necessarily in porn flicks.
It's about 2/3 of it. I would write more. I just have to be inspired. That's my problem, is I have to be inspired, and I just don't get inspired all the time. But
that's normal.
But seriously, a series called Hellcats Hell Camp would be very spicy.
Brisk, you're fucking genius. Dawn, read Twitch chat. You have to do that now.
No.
That is a fantastic idea.
Oh dear Lord. So, what time are we going to wrap this up? I don't have all the
background on that one.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm such a dork. Like, there's things that I would love to do in the game or get excited about in the game, but it's not necessarily everybody's favorite topic to talk about. Most of our viewers, we don't talk about. Do we ever talk about lore, guys? Ever? No.
Rarely.
We don't talk about lore ever, because like most of us are just like, eh.
Well, there's a lot of
Hey.
people that are genuinely interested in it, though. It's kind of cool when you think about it, right? When you think about the because it's a vast universe, it's a vast story, and I think it deserves the attention that it deserves.
Yep, and CCP has done a fantastic job at not finishing everything. Like there is mysteries where like, okay, so up until here, and then the information stops. Is it
Well,
connected to something else? Because we've seen that CCP has no issues with staying quiet, and then 5, 6 years later, like, hey guys, remember that one thing where it just stopped? Guess what? It's connected to this thing, and now a lot of things make sense. Like,
that feels kind of aftermarket though, where they're like,
yeah, but setting things up that way and making sure that it fits and makes sense and it doesn't feel like plot armor, that takes skill. Like that's not an easy thing to do. And
Like-
it's fun to have a lot of information, and not all the information that you can find has to be connected to all the other information. And shifting, and I love this quote from Vampire the Masquerade, shifting between the information and the bullshit, that's also part of the fun. And if you get it wrong, or you talk about others and then together you come to completely new theory, or you discuss about it, it is a lot of fun to do.
I mean, like, when me and Ash were talking several months ago, mid Triglavian lore stuff, right? We come across a quote from a dev. I want to say it was Soundwave back in like 2011, and they were commenting on wormholes. And it was basically, he said something along the lines of, wormholes are part of an ongoing story that has been going in the background since day one.
Oh yeah,
and then we found the comment.
This is my main criticism, right? Because I left.
Hold on, Caleb. Hold on. Let me finish
everything.
this. Let me finish this, please, because this is where it gets funny. There's another quote from a dev that also states more recently that the current events are a culmination of a storyline going since Wormholes. And we were sat there like, holy fuck, so this is just one story going from day one that might not be a contiguous story. They might have dropped off at points and picked hooks back up, but they've had these ideas the entire time. Like the guy in charge of the lore, Delegate Zero, I think everyone who knows him will basically just be there like, yeah, he's a fucking legend at stories. Because he is. I don't know how he crafts the stories he does.
Well, I can tell you, and you won't like the answer. This is what is in pen and paper circles called easy mastering. This is what you do when you want to be able to ad hoc play a game. You have a lot of backdrop ideas, and then you don't really tie them together. You let the players do that, and then you basically claim that you were thinking about doing exactly that all along, right? This is no. Well, this is what they do, because it's kind of what Dutch was hinting at, the whole point of when players speculate and tinfoil around lore, and then basically they write new content. It's filling in the gaps. There was there might have been an idea of where to take some of the lore stuff back in the day, but there is no way that these things were meant to be tied together and actually be executed the way that they have been executed on the server.
Yeah,
being involved with organizing live role play events, seeing how hard it is to consistently have if you're talking about an event like that's a weekend, to have multiple events have one overarching story, but despite that, everything has its own separate story related to that event, but still being able to consistently tie all those components together and include changes based on how players interact with it, that is extremely easy, and it's extremely common to get that wrong. And then you get retcons and a big pile of things that you don't want to touch it with a 20-foot pole. So seeing the quality that's happening with Eve and how well it connects, and some things are we've lost complete story arcs because a player blew something up, or they stored it somewhere and didn't realize what they had, and that's it. It's cut off. That's gone.
Yeah.
We'll never get it, and you don't know how much of an impact it could have had if that information was out there, or if that item was reported or shared. Like, hey, I've got this. What should we do with it? Getting that right and making those decisions, like if it's gone, it's gone. That's over. You could spend weeks in man hours to generally have an idea, like if players go left, this is what's going to happen. If they go right, and then variations of that, and then still be able to say it's gone because the players did this. That takes skill.
I mean, that's very much like Jamil's body just upping and vanishing, and devs literally being there like, yeah, there's supposed to be something to do with that, but I guess you've lost it, so have fun. You've got another Soundwave quote from The Origin of Wormholes where, what was it? There was like 8 things hidden, and we've only discovered 5.
Mm-hmm. But
And
that's the thing.
He won't even tell us. Well, DZ won't tell us because he knows, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's the part where if you're not interested in lore, sure, no problem. But if you're curious but you weren't aware, a lot of people have probably missed out on a lot of fun they could interact with because they didn't know. So seeing what CCP is doing now with those, CCP is live on Twitch with that news item, like this is happening in this system with a live feed. Having the scope news items where people basically had a TLDR recap of what was happening or what could be happening, and the speed at which the world news item has reports fill in there just goes to show that it's being picked up and people are interacting with it, and it just shows that EVE lore is fun and it's not just a gimmick.
Well, again, I'm gonna disagree at least partially, because back in the day,
contrarian.
back in the day, CCP had a similar opinion as what Dutch and Bart is kind of going with here, and Ash is doing it quite often. Many of the lore people do so. The problem is that they kept doubling down on lore and lore being important, and CCP should drive the story and all that. Until finally, I think it took almost 10 years, Torfy Franz finally opened his eyes and realized this is not the important story that's happening in EVE Online. The important story in EVE Online is actually made by the players. Now we're on the other side of that, and CCP has been putting the players front and center, which I think is amazing, for at least 5+ years, right? This is really good. But this is what got us the 2 best lore books in EVE, which is about the actual players, right? The growing books. So
I don't
my
think
point
we
is,
disagree.
my point is, and I'm getting to it, if CCP wants to reintroduce lore, they should do it the way that they did with the Triglavians, where it is meaningful, makes an impact, and yes, it forces everyone to be integral parts of the lore. Otherwise, they should leave it in the background and stop wasting hours on it.
So I don't think we disagree. I think there's just, as you say, there's that turning point, right, where it goes from being, okay, yes, it's not irrelevant, but it's not as player driven as it is now, right? Like, well, Trigs weren't entirely player driven. I'm not going to get into the depths of that though, but it's more player driven. I think that's fair to say, right, Dutch?
Yeah, but you have a drop-off point. Like the early events, it makes sense because you had records being set at having like 4,500 players online at the same time. If you have like the more guided events, like this is happening and just latch on, and CCP has a more driven approach behind it, that makes sense in that context because you have a limited player base. But if you look at, for example, the liberation of Kaldari Prime, the amount of players going in there was so huge that players could take over and basically abort entire events by interacting a certain way because they had the number. So that takes a serious adjustment in still having lore driven things, but instead of taking the lead as the game developer, putting things out there and leaving it more and more to the players, and then have the players expand upon the story and include mechanics or game changes partially on that, or partially just having it, leaving it more in the hands where certain outcomes with how many systems go one way or the other, or any other way, like that's more on how the players interact with it. So that it's a change,
But
and
it's
it makes sense, but it's unfair to say how Eve lore is now is the same as how it was years and years and years ago.
the point I'm trying to make is, if they want to make these amazing mysteries and almost ARG like puzzles that we have to solve, first of all, they need to make them a little bit better, and they need to make them not so much more complicated, but they need to be more than just something where you have to brute force stuff and sit there and spend hours and hours on dumb thing.
I'm sorry, but with the Triglavian, the trinary data folds, with
not just
the
that, but do you
Triglavian
remember,
wording and figuring that out, like trying to put in that is.
do you remember us getting the triangular puzzles that we had to slowly piece together, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah, but
yeah.
it's a
I'm just
balancing
saying
act.
that
Look,
it needs to be integrated properly into what is then to follow, and it needs
Oh,
to be
yeah.
something that almost again forces the interest of everyone, including null players. I want the Eve lore to be so meaningful that, and not just in a one point in time event. It needs to be something that has consequences down the line. This is why I want CCP to consider or reconsider how standings work and what it actually does. I think there is huge possibilities of actually adding meaningful content just by fixing the way that standings work, both on an individual level and on a corporation and alliance level.
So
Force us to be part of the NPC stuff if we want to engage with NPC assets or ships.
So I think that's coming. I honestly do.
Yeah, and I think so
I
too.
do
And I think
feel
that
a
is
lot
going
of
to be
how
good.
things were. I do think that a lot of how things were are going to be changed over time, but it's not something you can make happen from one day upon the other. And with the challenges and the puzzles and figuring it out, that is an extremely tricky balancing act, because if you have low hanging fruits for the people who are just getting started and still need to puzzle other things, the experienced people will look at it and just grab the low hanging fruits and run with it. And if you make things so difficult that specialized and really bright minds are unable to figure it out, an average player who doesn't have that dedication of background is never going to figure it out. So
Yeah.
it's a tough balancing act, and I think that where CCP is at right now is on the right track. Like, sure, there's still tweaks and changes that could be made, but they're on the right track.
So
Well, again,
I actually want to address something.
I would start at something really hardcore. I would say if you have criminal status in high sec, you can't use any NPC stations in Empire space at all.
Yeah, I mean, okay. I want to address something though that Dutch just said, and it's the point about if you make stuff too hard. Yes, higher level players might get it, they might not, but your average player won't get it. I'm pretty sure there's still stuff from the Trig storyline we haven't got.
I am 100% sure that there are still things to be found and figured out.
I DM'd Ash this morning because I was watching a video from a YouTube group I watch that was talking about cryptography and hiding stuff in videos. And I was there like, it just instantly threw me back to, on the Trig videos, there was always a static portion that we never figured out.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just there like, I'm sorry, but that just screams of something hidden there to me. Something that we never got.
Yeah, but those clips were also because people start like they got fragments and bits and pieces, and one person looked at it's like, wait, I think this is part of a video file. And then all of a sudden it's a puzzle of getting things in the right order. And if you didn't get all the pieces, because there is a randomizer in if it drops, and if it drops, what section drops, you could dedicate yourself. But if you have a bit you're unlucky with the RNG, or certain things just was picked up by other people and it's a unique item, and if another person does nothing with it, you lost it, you're still going to have those blanks in the overall picture, or the static with the fractions of the fragments that was happening with the initial strike labeling videos.
So I don't just mean the initial ones. I mean the ones of, when they were doing their cladistic proving shall follow, the whole speech thing.
The three voices, and
Yeah.
they're desynchronized. Oh,
yeah.
good lord.
And like the static spots in that just screams, there's some message hidden here. I know we all thought it at the time, but we could never find anything.
Could be, yeah.
And honestly, that's like the ARG level of stuff that I like. I know a lot of the art guys like, and probably is where Caleb wants to go with it as well.
Well,
you have the in-game ramifications.
Well, I like the ARGs and the online puzzles, and I've been very heavily into them since I discovered them. I put them on the shelves for a while because I don't think the quality right now is very high. At least it's not inspiring to me. But when I played the best one that's that I've tried was actually the one that was used for marketing the Secret World as a game. That was the longest running ARG campaign, I think, in gaming history. If you look at beyond the weird online mysterious things like the cicada thing and stuff like that. But when I played that, it felt like an achievement because it had to be a group thing, just like some of the stuff that CCP has done. It's just, as I was mentioning this to Siegel at FanFest, this is the kind of stuff that is incentivizing for players to actually take part in. This is also one of the things that right now I think is the coolest things in lore and the lore nerds. It's when they do these things like the classification of stars and figuring out whether there's a pattern and stuff like that. I just feel like a lot of it, CCP doesn't really have a good plan, so they're kind of waiting for you guys, which is again back to the easy mastering. And I know that that's good and it works and it's really useful, but I think when it comes to ARGs, they need to be a little bit better planned, and they need to be something where it kind of makes intuitive sense at some level, and it also integrates both pre and post when it comes to the overall lore. So I think they should put together a little bit more of a team to actually work these things out of how can we make these crypto puzzle things really engaging and complicated enough to actually require more than one brain, and then scatter them around the universe so they're kind of difficult to find, and how we have to maybe go to specific locations. And well, this is like Quest 101 when you're talking about mastering, whether you're writing an adventure game or whether you are writing a pen and paper scenario. It doesn't matter. It's just, this is not that difficult, and they must have enough brains in there to do something like this. And that could engage us into the lore. And I think the important thing is it could tie us into the lore overarching story, especially if they did things like heating up the war, changing it so that standing actually makes sense. So if you're a criminal, you can't use NBC and Concord supported areas. If you are Galente hater, you will not be able to dock in Galente stations. It's not like this is complicated, and it's not like it's like, oh, now you're making the game too difficult for new bros. Well, if a new bro can't understand that if he shoots another player, he can't use services, then he's just dumb. It's intuitively easy to understand. If you choose the criminal life, you have to be able to understand that you have to live the criminal life. So I don't think this is at all making things complicated. And when I challenged the LoSec guys about this, when we had an interview with Baltram from on TIS, he got a little bit worried. But seriously, if you are the enemy of the Empire, you shouldn't be able to use their stations. You have to make your own. And we have structures. This is not complicated. Player-owned structures are great. Design-wise, they are near perfect. They have a few flaws that I know CCP are looking at. But other than that, if you want to stage as a criminal, you have to make your own house.
I would love nothing more than to see that if you have a suspect timer, you don't get tether. If you have a criminal timer, you don't have tether. If you have bad standings, you can't dock in certain parts in space. I would love nothing more, and I'm highly in favor of that.
And then people
But
always
at the
bring,
same time,
they
at the
always,
same time, you're always going to have people like suicide gankers or other parts who going to rile against the idea, and that's the part where you have a really tough balancing act between things that would make sense from a lore point of view, but it doesn't make sense if you look at it from a game point of view. And I'm just
I
going
don't
to
agree.
use a really recent example: players supporting Triglavians being labeled by all the officials as traitors of humankind and civilization. They could still dock everywhere. It didn't have a simple repercussion, which doesn't make sense from a lore perspective, because from a lore point of view, they would have had all their rights and privileges cancelled the moment it was known they sided with the Triglavian. But if you look at it from a game point of view, it makes perfect sense what they did with the introduction of Edencom and taking the standing hits with Edencom and not the empires itself.
Now,
That's the balancing act between
Mhm.
the game as a game and lore in itself.
Now that
But
said,
again,
I would say
that doesn't
sorry,
tie
Ken.
into griefing. And when it comes to the
No,
ganking,
no, but when you
the
do it with the
ganking
empires, it
griefing
does.
lifestyle in high sec, I think CCP's stance should be fuck them, because they do not add value to the game. Even some say, oh, it's a valid gameplay style. No, it's not. It's figured out. It's all in the favor of the aggressor, and it's chasing actual players away from the game. These people should die in a fire.
In game, of course.
It's partially self-regulating, but yeah, there are things that are definitely out of whack balance-wise.
So I would say part of the issue of why they couldn't do what we suggest with Triglavians was saying that you're going to lose access to empire structures, but saying it will be fine though, guys. Kind of gives the game up of where you're going, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't know why you don't think it'll be fine. Everything will be fine. It's okay.
But, so
but that's
gives
what I
the
mentioned
game away,
yesterday.
right?
Like if you look at it from start to finish, like you introduce Triglavians, people could side with it, but it would take time. And if they would lose standings all this time before they got to the end of the race, they couldn't interact with the content until the end of everything that was over.
Exactly. However, I think if they do something between the empires or between pirate factions, there is at least room to bring those consequences in, right? You fight for the Galente, you lose Amar and Caldari standings. Cool. You can still dock in Galente space, though. Yes, you've restricted where you can go, but
That's
you can
faction
still
warfare
play.
right now.
Well,
Yeah.
as Jan was joking, he said, "Well, you can theoretically have positive standing with all the empires." Anyone that's actually done any missioning or anything like that knows how fucking difficult that is. You will always
It's
end
not
up.
that hard.
No, but you
To be
can.
positive?
You can. However, if you're going to say you get high standings with all the empires, yeah, that's a big challenge.
There was one time you
it's
could get high
near
standings with all
impossible.
the empires.
It's near impossible to hold that, right? Because you will always end up having shot something and then you've just lost all your positive standing. It's really difficult to
That's
have something
not
like
even
8 with all of the empires. But it
Okay,
is
you're right. Now having 8 with everybody is almost impossible.
exactly.
If
And that's
not
what I just said.
impossible.
And that's my
But
point, right?
having like
But if you want
1 or
high
2 with
with one,
everybody.
you end up having almost always negative with their opponent, which is exactly how it should be.
Yes.
And then having a consequence to that, whether that is economical or docking or anything like that. And again, if you go to most systems, it's not just one empire represented in a system. There's stations from more than one empire in a lot of systems, right? So it's not like if I'm +8 with Galente and -4 with Caldari. If I'm in, say, in Everyshore, many of those systems have both, right? So I will just have to choose my station. And this is something that I believe was actually intended in the original design, because all of these things are so ancient. And when you look at who is positive against who, corporation and alliance and empire-wise for NPCs, you can see that all of these things were meant to have an impact and the mechanics were there. It's just that they didn't put in that last limitation or downside, which was as I see it, I think it was because they were running it on training wheels until people had figured out how the game was supposed to work.
So I will correct one thing. You say it's impossible to get high standings with all. There was one time when it was very, very easy, and that was when we had the Glamour X boosters.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like
Take that bad boy. Do some the special missions.
Mhm.
Storyline.
But yeah, the storyline missions. Bam.
hand tags in for every empire, and then go do factions.
You got at least 3 to 4 with everybody.
Yeah.
Easy
But I
peasy.
mean, that's the thing. The standings should have a repercussion. I know we've had hints of it before, right? That CCP want to do it that if they've got roaming fleets going around and they can do logi, if you've got positive standings, they'll do logi to you. If you've got negative standings, they'll hunt you down and kill you.
Blood gang.
You know, like that should be the consequences of picking a side.
Yeah, but things are already in place like that. Like, for example, I completed a storyline mission yesterday, and one faction that I cleared it for got a big boost, but the opposing factions, the opposing 2 Empire faction and other corps, I took a standing hit. Like, it wasn't big, but you did take that standing hit because you raised your standings with their opposing force. So
absolutely.
there's it's already in the game, so it's here already, and it might just be more expended upon in the near or far future. And that's
Okay, yeah,
awesome.
that's the better comment. Sorry, Dutch. Yes, because there's not really too much of a consequence for bad standings. I believe it's higher taxes and losing access to missions.
Yeah. I find it funny that, and I'm sure there's a lore thing that I don't know about, but high Caldari standing gives you high Mordu's Legion standing?
Yes.
That's because Mordu's Legion originate from the Caldari Galente War, where Mordus, the person who created the Mordu Legion, was a commander in the Caldari Navy. And at the end of the war, he created his own mercenary unit, and the Caldari state or the corporations are definitely a large part of his clientele. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Basically, if you're good with Caldari, he's good with you.
Yeah, I've got +9 in both, and I'm like, but okay. That's why I figured there had to be a lore reason.
Yeah, well, there you go. And this is a really solid tip I'd like to give you, Don, if you don't have it already. Eve's Source is a great book. Like, it gives you a lot of general background about capsuleers, like what does it take to become a capsuleer, background on the empires and the pirate factions as well.
Yeah, it's a great book, and there's many great books that have come out of the CCP printing press, but I would really like CCP to put some of these in the next store for Plex. Thank you very much, so I can get them as PDF. Same with the old Eon magazines. Please, can I have Eon magazine back issues as PDF for Plex?
Dear God, that would be... Sorry, you go, Dutch.
I'm just going to make a plug, like, hey, if that's what you want, vote for me for the CSM 16, and I'll take it up with CCP.
It's just so fucking obvious, because you can't easily get a hold of these things anymore. Many of them are sold out or rare and not in print anymore. And I think it's just dumb that CCP has not given us some sort of venue to actually get access to these sources, because they're really good. I loved some of the Eon magazines. I thought they were amazing. Why do we not have them available anymore?
I mean, I definitely say maybe not PDF, because that's too shareable, right? They want to keep some kind of DRM on it. Yeah, I mean it from the perspective of one person purchases it, it goes on. Is Backstage Wiki still around, Dutch?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Is the Backstage Wiki still around?
I don't know.
Okay, because I know it's been up and down. But yeah, one person purchases one of the old Eon magazines, and yeah, it'll get shared if it's PDF. Like, this is one of the few times that I'd actually advocate them having a bit more control over it and saying, hey, you buy it with NES, we give you a code, and you get it off of, say, Audible or Amazon eBooks, whatnot.
think Greg's gonna fall asleep because he's not a lore person, and we're at 3-something. I'm having a blast chit-chatting about
What's
lore, but I
happening with
think
the
we gotta.
war, Dawn? Have you been killing baddies? And what's happening with initiative?
Oh, I didn't even care. It's something actually. I've heard rumblings, but no one. But like Pando was the only one that like said something somewhat concrete. But and maybe they'll announce something on Meta Show today since Brisk's there. But it sounds like Initiative is getting ready for their next deployment or campaign.
Yep, that's kind of why I asked.
And
Okay. Frank has his update today, so
Yep,
let's
thank you,
leave
Brisk.
him to it.
We won't
Okay.
steal your thunder then, but things are happening and rumblings are occurring. So
And there's also been lots of attacks this week against 3 Tech D. It looks like last night was a big what to do. I wish I was in charge, but I'm not. So everyone in Fleet knew my opinion about last night. So.
and when it comes to the whole shenanigans of spin and narrative about the war, I really encourage anyone that has 15 minutes or so to kill, go and read the latest Movement article. It is glorious. It is so on the nose. Of course, it's Movement writing, so it will trigger some people, but he's asking some very interesting question, and of course, he ties it back with the whole casino war and the difference between this war and the original casino war. So a lot of good stuff in there. And funny enough, because he knows that it's controversial, some of what he's saying, he's actually saying he's only putting it in there for posterity, and so you can read it 3 to 5 years down the pipe, and then say, "Oh, I think Movement actually told us about this." So go read that seriously.
So, are we going to wrap the show up in a minute? Is that the plan? Or?
No. We're not
Oh.
forced to leave until Brisk
No,
kicks
I
us
was
out.
just going to say, Event is streaming Anger Games. Do we want to send people their way?
Yeah, didn't they just start?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the Angler games. Go see.
Sorry, yes.
Steel with Mackerel Cloud. And did we ever give Dirk a fish name?
No, I think Dirk resisted.
He did. Because
That's because he's a guppy, right? He's a guppy.
Guppins instead of Gobbins.
Dear Lord.
Oh, and let's not
Lady
forget
Scallop.
that there's some amazing names on the Angler game, at least from my opinion. Jintan
You said
showed,
Angler games. That's
yes,
hilarious.
Jintan showed his face recently, and is actually part of it now. And of course, our very own now CCP Tay, aka CCP Swift, is also over there, and Aurora and Arcee, and it's just filled with good names. I think Suetonia's also been there at least once, and then of course the hosts Dirk and Soth and Mac, and yeah, some great people. So and it's actually it looks like some really interesting matches. Maybe not as high end as it was in the past, because they're kind of only kicking it off again, right? The tournament people have been a little bit mothballed.
Yeah, there's kind of, I guess there's that brain drain from not having had a tournament for a while, right?
Yeah,
ingrained talent is gone.
Yeah, but then you can see that as soon as some tournament stuff actually shows up, all of the oldies are coming out of the woodworks and back into the pods. It's just awesome to see, especially because like I've been a fan of Tuskers since way back. Not that I understand much of tournament stuff, because it's still a mystery, most of what's happening. I need massive commentary, because otherwise I'm not fucking understanding any of what's going on. But one of our friends that we met at FanFest, to Evil, is actually part of the whole Tuskers thing, and yeah, he's also back. So I think it's exciting.
Okay, then for my part, I'm just going to say thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about my candidacy for CSM. I appreciate the effort. Plenty of hard questions, especially on fields that are outside of my direct expertise. Some people seem to be in favor. Other people say that based on things I said in my stands that they're not going to vote for me. Well, that's part of the election process.
They say that, but then when they get to the 40 people on the list, they're like, I remember this name. So
Yeah, but at the same time, the one thing that I like the most for this show is how Caleb, in the end, at the start, he's like, yeah, lore doesn't matter. And then at the end, he did start to tag along, like, you know what, this is what I'd actually like to see, and start get more and more on board and along with lore and lore related content. So that's something I'm going to consider a win for this episode at least.
Well, as I told you, I was into lore for the first couple of years because I really wanted to get into the RP stuff, but it kind of it shifted. A lot of stuff happened back in the early days where
Oh yeah.
lore got less and less relevant and less and more ridiculed. And it's one of the few things that I actually don't like about old goons. It's that I think they had a big role in ridiculing and killing a lot of RP stuff. So luckily
It definitely
we've had a cultural revolution, so that's not the case anymore. But back then, I do think that they poo-pooed on roleplay, and a lot of people then chimed in and did the same.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's the part where if you're a game developer and you're putting effort and time, and it just doesn't seem to be well received, or it gets sabotaged, and then you still are unable to deliver, and people that are interested join the criticism, you're going to cut back efforts on that and focus on other things as well. So seeing the change and the massive improvement and better communications and interest and support for lore and lore related content, I say we're back on track for some really amazing and good times in the future.
well, let's hope. All right, final thoughts, right? Or are we not final thoughting?
Well,
Yeah, we could do final thoughts. Sure,
Okay,
why
well,
not?
I'm going to say hit me. Not physically, please.
So we'll start at the top. Bar, do you, any final thoughts for this week?
I don't know. I'm in a weird way. For once, I'm looking forward to what CCP have coming out over the next, shall I say, 2 months. There's some good hints coming, right? That might be good changes.
Mm-hmm. And then Caleb, any final thoughts?
Well, I do have one for CSM actually, because even though I'm a little bit underwhelmed about this year's CSM for some reason, I do have a little bit of an advice to anyone that wants to actually participate and vote, and I do think that people should vote if they want to make a difference. Um, Consider having different things on your ballot. Don't necessarily always just go for what other people are telling you. Choose like 3 favorites and make sure that they're not in the same area. So diversify your ballot so
Your
we get a
portfolio.
diverse CSM representatives, right? Because even though you might not be that interested in, say, high sec, considering having a high sec candidate on your ballot, just because you know that every type of gameplay in Eve matters, I think is a healthy way of doing it. And then, as I said, consider having a joker, having someone where you wouldn't normally vote for them, or you don't really, they're too new, or don't necessarily have the strongest platform, but they have something that you like. So have a joker in there. So have your top, your middle, and your third selection, and then a joker. I think everyone should do that, including Imperium. Of course, you should follow the ballot to some extent. Um, Vote with the rest of the group, but consider putting in your own flavor there as well. If you have someone that you've listened to that you like, shift them out for something that's on the official ballot that people have asked you to vote. Oh, and of
Don?
course, risk for CSM.
For my final thought, I think I'm glad that we were able to have a candidate that I've never heard of before, but that does represent some extra sides of Eve, but also seems to have the whole health of Eve in mind, even if that means ruining everything I love dearly to do. And I hope that other CSM hopefuls will reach out with us and feel welcome, because Theta Thursday for USTZ and then Push to Talk for EUTZ. Definitely reach out with me or Dirk, Statiel, and we'll be happy to try and get you on so that way you can spread the word.
All right, Dutch, did you have anything that you wanted to add before we?
Well, in like votes matter. Don't vote with who you think is gonna probably have better odds. Like if there's a candidate that you really want to see on, put that person on number one, because that makes all the difference in the world. And I'm just gonna finish up by saying, like, hey, there isn't a single way to play Eve, so let's make it a great experience together.
For sure, that sounds fair. And I think we'll round up the show. We had thanks everybody for coming out. We appreciate you dropping by. I think Eric's going to be back next week to make things less fucked because I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
You
I just put
the logo up there, so you're already.
Yeah, I got the logo, but it's all overlaid on top of Theta Thursday stuff. And I just like added in fucking a picture of Justin Bieber and my cat and my dog. But whatever. Anyways, so yeah, thanks for coming out. Don't forget that in 45 minutes or so, we have the Meta Show on Imperium News Network, and that's the weekly look into the Matani's dark soul and Brisk's beautiful blue eyes.
Matani has no soul.
Anyways, thank you very much all for coming out, and thank you very much to our special guest tonight, or this afternoon rather, Dutch. Good luck in your CSM bids, sir, and we're gonna peace out at that. Cheers.